That little bit, yes, recording in progress.
Welcome to Navigating Disability, where Jen, my co host, and I explore stories of advocacy, resilience, and change. Today, we're joined by Mark Toomey, a former global leader in digital governance turned relentless disability rights advocate. In 2017, Mark found himself battling the government for support for his disabled son, only to discover a system failing countless of others. Now he's fighting to hold the government accountable for the harm caused by bureaucratic failures. With decades of expertise in business transformation, Mark once guided organisations through the digital era. Today, he's using that same strategic mindset to fight for justice. Join us as we dive into this journey, his mission, and what's next in the fight for accountability. Let's get started. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Kate, and hello, Jen.
Hi,
Thank
thanks
you
for joining us.
so much for joining us today. Tell us about when your life changed.
Well, I was delivering an education class to a disability and aged care services provider in Sydney, teaching them about governing IT. And a message came through that my son was in hospital. He'd had a massive brain hemorrhage, completely spontaneous, nothing external caused it. He just dropped like a stone in the middle of preparing to leave a camp. We've just heard Kyle Sandilands
Yeah,
whinging about his brain aneurysm that he thinks might leave him like a vegetable in a wheelchair. I reckon that Kyle Sandilands should spend an hour with Jeff
yeah.
and find out what it's really like to have a brain aneurysm rupture and kill half your brain.
And
So
your
how
son
long?
is Jeff?
Sorry, Kate. Sorry.
Sorry, your son is Jeff, Mark?
Yeah, Jeff is my son.
And
He's
how old
now
is he?
he's 45. He was 35 when this happened to him.
So it's been
Uh,
10 long years.
so it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
Up until that point, he was a happy hippie.
A happy hippie.
Uh, yeah, he was a happy hippie, and he really was a happy hippie. And people talked about him afterwards as the guy who helped everybody. That stopped in a blink for him. It really became life changing across the board. So he was in hospital for nearly 2 years,
Wow.
and the hospital journey itself was absolutely fraught. Um, I knew nothing at all about the disability world before the 5th of May 2015.
Yeah.
By the end of August 2015, I knew a hell of a lot about it.
You really do get thrown in the deep end.
A
And
forced education,
Yeah.
and nobody's there to help you.
yeah,
I don't think it's changed even today. Even after the Disability Royal Commission, it hasn't changed. And what a surprise. Now, the government has accepted, what was it, 22 out of more than 200 recommendations out of the Disability Royal Commission?
I don't think that's full recommendations either, Mark. I
Yeah,
think it's something like 13 in full
yeah,
and 22 in part or something.
yeah. One of my thoughts for the future of government is that we should have a permanent standing committee of the Senate and the House that constantly monitors government progress on implementing recommendations out of royal commissions and Senate inquiries and audit reports and things like that, because what governments have developed a habit of doing is commissioning a report to shut up the whinging and then make some token gestures around implementing what comes from the report, and then putting the rest of it on the shelf and saying what a great job we've done.
Mm.
We don't accept that anymore.
And we've seen that time and time again.
That's right. And let's not be too shy. The current government, Bill Shorten, launched the NDIS review to find out everything that was wrong with the NDIS review, and we told them everything that was wrong with the NDIS in the NDIS review, and they've done nothing with it at all. They've just used it as a smokescreen to justify themselves going on and delivering the agenda that somehow became the Labor agenda after they had pilloried it when it was the Liberal agenda. So, yeah, watching the disability world go around and round in circles is something that I don't like to see.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
So, coming back to Jeff's journey, when he came out of Royal Melbourne Hospital, he was about 42 kilograms.
Oh, wow.
He couldn't move. He couldn't walk. He couldn't talk. He couldn't eat or drink or anything.
Did he have brain cognition?
He had awareness. He had very limited capacity to, I won't say write, but scratch some letters on a pad. He was a baby.
Yeah.
He had to learn everything again from scratch. And that was made 10 times more difficult because a baby has full control over all of their muscles and so on. The right side of Jeff's brain is dead, effectively. So he had no control at all over the majority of the left side of his body. But somehow through that, with an absolutely awesome physiotherapist, he gradually regained use of his right arm and right leg. And an amazing speech pathologist taught him how to swallow so he could eat, and then he could speak. And gradually, some of the king's horses and a few of the king's women put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Oh.
With big gaps.
Yeah.
Did he come back to your house, Mark?
No, my house is a farmhouse in the country.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was never going to be practical. His mother's house is a 2-story townhouse. That was never going to work. He was said by the hospital head honchos to be ready for discharge about a year after he went into the rehab hospital. We didn't think he was, but what we thought made no difference to them. And this was happening right in the transition between pre-NDIS and post-NDIS. And one of the things you learned about the NDIS at that point was that nobody had any idea what anything was about. The hospital was trying to force him to be taken into some sort of care by the Victorian health system. So they were determined to put him into a nursing home. And they fought tooth and nail to put him into a nursing home. They had 2 problems. One was that no nursing home would take him, and the other was me. Because I was echoing what the nursing homes were saying and saying, he can't go into a nursing home. It won't work. He'll upset everybody else in the nursing home because that's the state he was in at the time, and he'll go mad. So we were pushing to go straight into the NDIS, and that was possible because there was an agreement between the state of Victoria and the NDIA that said anybody who comes along with a new disability after this agreement is made goes straight into the NDIS. Well, it took 6 months to fight the NDIS to make that happen. And in the meantime, the hospital made an application to VCAT for a guardianship order so that they could take control because I was obstructive. It all came together in a rush. Sorry.
How did you deal with that?
Well,
I feel like you would be the type of person that would come out fighting. Very strong advocate for Jeff.
Yeah.
I sort of did, but then I didn't have to because suddenly the NDIS said, oh, yeah, okay, we can take him. And then it was a process of finding a group home because that was the only scenario that was available. And wow, did we learn about group homes? What can we say about group homes? Can we say anything complimentary about group homes? Yeah, we can say there might be some group homes out there somewhere that actually deliver a good life for their residents. But Jeff needed one-on-one 24-hour support and supervision. And he was bundled into a house with 8 residents.
Oh, wow.
And at most 3 staff. So
he needed it all.
Yeah. So it didn't work very well. In fact, the staff was so effective and competent that he had a fall on his first day and smashed his left shoulder.
Back in hospital?
Back in hospital. So, and Jeff's, he's had so many surgeries, it's ridiculous.
How did you, as his father, how did that affect you?
When the going gets tough, the tough dig a hole. And I dug a hole, a bunker, and really settled into what is still my life of constant, intense advocacy for Jeff, but now also for all other people who are being harmed by the NDIS.
At what point did you know that you had to take that role on? At what point did you know that Jeff was not going to be looked after by the system?
By the time he was in the group home, I was absolutely sure that the old system was never going to do a decent job. At that stage, I lived with high hopes of the promise of the NDIS. But over the next couple of years, it became obvious that it wasn't going to be working. So I guess I spent 2017, 18, and most of 19 trying to get appropriate supports for Jeff, trying to keep the group home operating effectively. And then COVID came along. And what did the group home do when COVID came along? Well, they locked out all of the non-their employee people. They locked out the therapists.
All the eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were totally focused on themselves. The last thing they wanted was COVID getting into their house, which would make them responsible. Well, guess what? COVID got into their house. But by the time COVID got into their house, we had hit the NDIA with an emergency change of circumstances.
Yep.
And they allowed Jeff very generously, they thought, they allowed Jeff to have enough funding to live in a 3-person shared house with shared supports. And we said, nah, that's enough money for us to put him into a single accommodation apartment. And that's what we did. And then we asked for the one-on-one support that was required to facilitate that. And they said, yeah, nah, you're funded for shared support with 2 other people, so that's all we're going to give you. And a little bit extra because of COVID. So for the next, from there on until now, we've had to find ways for Jeff to be supported when the NDIA only funds about 75% of the support that he needs.
Let's clarify. You were in Melbourne, so the lockdowns in Melbourne were horrific.
Oh, they were intense.
10 times worse than where we are. We're in Brisbane.
Yeah. And by the way, in August 2012, well before any of this, my partner and I bought a farm. That was our tree change. We didn't move immediately onto the farm, and thank goodness for that. We had tenants here, but in early 2016, when it became obvious that my professional career was ended because of the need to support Jeff, we moved onto the farm. And then when the group home started to be not such a great experience, we had to go into commuter mode. So I was commuting 100 to 120 kilometres each way, 6 days a week.
Oh, wow.
To make sure that Jeff was safe.
So you yourself, Mark, you just said it before, your professional life came to an end because of the support that Jeff required. So you've given up, a lot. How does that make you feel?
I'm pretty angry about that.
Yeah.
The system doesn't care. I was contributing to the performance of organisations and governments around the world. In the 3 years prior to Jeff having his hemorrhage, I had been in something like 30 different cities around the world as a speaker, as an educator, teaching business leaders and government leaders about how to get their IT right.
Yeah.
It was it's a bit ironic that I was doing that, and one of the governments in the world that most needs to learn that is the Australian government, and they never listened, and they still don't listen.
But we still have PACE.
Yeah, well, PACE is a fantastic illustration of everything that the government does wrong.
Yep. Completely agree with that.
There's this thing that I used to say to people when they were uncomfortable with me telling them that they had to take responsibility. and I would do this. I would say, you've got this IBM or Deloitte or Ernst & Young or whatever, an arm around your shoulder, and somebody saying, don't you worry, we'll look after that for you. What they meant was, don't worry about your profits or your funding, because we'll take all of that and more for as long as we can get away with to deliver things to you that you don't need and won't work anyway.
Mm.
The fan and the proverbial brown stuff have already met in the context of the NDIA's acquisition of the technologies that they use to run PACE. And PACE is an unmitigated disaster. Despite all of their rhetoric, sorry, I spent 45 years in the IT industry. I was the consultant who was sent in to analyze things that had gone horribly wrong. I know what causes things to go horribly wrong, and every one of those things is present in what we can see from a public perspective about the NDIS and PACE.
And certainly it's a battle that Jen and I face every day, is the NDIA taking accountability.
The NDIA doesn't take accountability. There is no such concept as accountability in their legislation or their ethic.
And we can say as much with the government as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is why, a journey that I never expected has taken me to a place that if you'd told me 20 years ago that I was where I am now, I'd have said you're mad.
Yeah.
I'm not just playing, I'm seriously doing politics and working as hard as I can to get independents elected into the next parliament.
Well, that was going to be my question, is when do we see Mark Toomey in government?
The ballot paper, yeah.
You're already seeing Mark Toomey in the background of politics. I hope that Climate 200 is still going to run the video I did with them, where we talk about just my views on climate, and more particularly on politicians who listen versus politicians who don't listen. So I'm there. I'm very involved in the campaign for Deb Leonard in the seat of Monash, and Deb is rated as one of the most highly probable success stories for this election. We're pretty damn confident that she will get up. The Liberal Party thought that their candidate from last year was so useless that they dumped him, and they put up a complete unknown to replace him in the seat of Monash. That's not going to work well for them. The Labor Party's thinking about not putting a candidate up at all, apparently. It's just ridiculous. Yeah, that's me in politics. I'm also engaging now with as many of the independent cohort as I can. And so, if you look at my posts on LinkedIn, which are pretty frequent now, you'll see that I have a full-scale tag list on every poster that I make. And 95% of them start with a list of independent members of parliament, senators, and other political aspirants. And I know that they're watching, because sometimes one or another of them will go, like.
So tell me, Mark, how do you see that changing the future for Jeff?
It's absolutely crucial. We have globally a strong right-wing bias coming into politics. And there's a lot of people now who see, particularly and astonishingly in the US, a drift to fascism. In the fascist ethic, people with disabilities are a waste of space. And so that will, if that continues to develop, that will make life extremely difficult, if not impossible, for people with disability. I shudder to think what's going to happen in the US over the next 4 years.
Seeing it already.
That's right. The first time in my life, I'm hoping for an assassination, but I'm actually expecting. Get this, I'm expecting a military coup in the USA because I think they've got smarter generals than Trump expects. And I think the generals will reach a point where, well, they will say, this is not America. This is going to stop. And that'll be the saving grace. Where am I trying to move things for Jeff and for the 600,000 people in Australia that are identified as having disability? Disability doesn't make you useless. Some of this planet's most significant, influential people have had disabilities. Jeff's not going to be a rocket scientist, but he has his place in the world. He's still an empath. He can still help people. He can still comfort people. He can still support people.
And he can educate them as well.
Oh, how dare you suggest that we might learn from somebody with a brain injury?
No, but the thing is, we all have our place in this world. We all have our own gifts to give.
Absolutely.
And it's about accepting that and being a little bit open-minded. And I think that's where we're at the moment. And this is what we hope this podcast can relay to the broader community, that it's okay to be different. It's okay. You are who you are. It's how you present yourself and how you use your ability, not your disability, your ability to do good in this world.
And just one of the things about Jeff and his current state, and this actually goes back to when he was in hospital. Jeff had extremely limited lung capacity because he'd been severely damaged in many respects. He had a tracheostomy, so he was breathing through a pipe. His lung capacity was bugger all. My sister, who was a physiotherapist, thought that it might help him if he learned to play harmonica. And one of her friends is Justin Brady, who's the harmonica and mandolin man out of Things of Stone and Wood.
Oh.
And so Justin started doing weekly sessions with Jeff, teaching him to play harmonica, and they would have jam sessions in his room at the hospital. And Jeff did learn to project and use his lungs more effectively. Roll forward to when Jeff moved into his first apartment. It was near a small shopping centre, and he used to get out there and busk. Now that he's moved into a new house in a newly developed or relatively newly developed area, with his support workers, he goes down to the local Woolworths and related shops 2 or 3 times a week, and he busks.
That is amazing.
And it's an Indian community, and the Indian people are just so generous.
Yeah.
And he always comes away after a couple of hours with $50 or more. I think his peak has been about 200.
Wow.
But he's also got a bag of groceries because people buy him some tucker. And he's got regulars now that stop and enjoy what he's doing. And a couple of his support workers are pretty talented people as well. And the deal is, if they are on support with Jeff and they go out busking, they are supporting him earning an income through busking.
Yeah.
They're already getting paid for their work.
Yeah. And getting paid quite well.
Yes, we pay our support workers quite well. We
And
don't
Jeff's
have.
contributing, isn't he? He's contributing to society because he's making people smile. He's
He is,
making people feel great about
yeah.
themselves.
And he's showing people, come on, Kyle Sandilands, come and see this. When you're a vegetable in a wheelchair, you can actually still entertain people.
Yeah.
In fact, of Kyle Sandilands' limited range of talents, and they are extremely limited.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you'd actually call them talents.
Well, that's true too, but let's be generous because we're in a generous mood. His limited range of talents, the biggest one is his voice, matched up with his attitude. And they're two things that have carried through for Jeff after a bit of hard work.
Yeah.
His attitude is quite interesting.
Look, we're only limited by the limitations we put on ourselves, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
If we want something bad enough, we'll work hard to get it. And I think that goes right across anyone in this world.
Yeah.
And he's showing that by his resilience and his purpose. He's getting out and doing what he loves.
He demonstrated his attitude magnificently when he and I and a few others went on Q&A June last year. And I had a prepared scripted question to ask Bill Shorten. And in the middle of Shorten responding in a very hopeless manner, I might say.
Surprised you were even allowed to ask the question, but go on.
Well, he blocked me after that.
Yes, of course he did.
But Shorten was making some mealy-mouthed comment about how they were fixing the NDIS, and Jeff piped up just in range of the microphone and said, "It's not working."
And couldn't have happened more beautifully.
Yeah.
Yeah. And PK nearly wet herself. So Shorten was getting it from the coalface.
Yeah.
Your system doesn't work, Bill.
Yeah. And tell me, Mark, it has been a long journey for you, and I'm assuming that you've done your S100s, you've been at the tribunal. What advice do you give to people that are in the same situation as you, that seem to be fighting the system and not getting anywhere? Knowing that the system also has changed, have you been through ART yet?
No, we've managed to avoid AAT and ART.
Wow, okay.
And quite simply, let's throw this card on the table. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and when we took my assailant to court in the last 5 years, I had to undergo 2 psychiatric assessments. And one of the psychiatrists said, "Yeah, you definitely got PTSD, and it's all anchored in this this sexual abuse." The other psychiatrist, of course, working for the other side, said, "Yep, you've got PTSD, but it's all caused by the NDIS."
Oh, nice.
I think that's the definition of complex PTSD. 2 separate causes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I've got complex PTSD. It makes me very afraid of confrontation. It means that there's no way that I could psychologically, for the good of my mental health, go through the processes of the AAT and the ART, because the NDIA is hostile, belligerent, obstructive. It delivers all of the things that I know would put me in a psychiatric ward.
The opposite of a model litigant.
Yeah.
The absolute opposite of a model litigant. So I haven't pursued, I got as far as opening a case and couldn't handle it any further. But I've always been able to work the system to deliver what's needed anyway, because up until now, the legislation said that if you survive the first 9 months of a plan, they have to give you a new plan if you ask for one.
Okay.
And so we've been through that process 5 times now. The plans last for 9 months, or 2 or 3 weeks after 9 months, we get a new plan. They bully, they carry on, they threaten, but they can't get around it. System's changing a little bit this year. More bias against the participant.
Yeah.
More bullying power to the NDIA. What are we going to do about that? Well, I don't know. Except that I'm no longer playing bureaucratic touch and go. I'm playing serious political aggression. And so I'm not just working with my independent candidate, I'm working across the system. And it's starting to show. And interestingly, if you look at LinkedIn and you look at various Facebook groups, what has been a trickle of people talking about the harms that are being caused to them has become a tsunami. And I was in a closed group meeting at the start of this week where Rick Morton was speaking. Now, Rick Morton and I have this little game that we play now where he laughs at me and says, "You're still stalking me, Mark." And yeah, absolutely, I'm stalking you. And on Monday, Rick was talking about the NDIS specifically and all of the harm that is coming. And one of the points that he made was that the NDIS issues need to become significant mainstream media discussions. Well, by sheer coincidence, I had started a conversation with a very significant mainstream media journalist who is exploring every aspect of the harm that is being caused by the NDIA. And you watch what that journalist puts out there in the next few weeks.
Oh, well, that's music to our ears. Because
Absolutely.
yes, that's absolute music to my ears. Yeah.
So the NDIS is going to be a significant election issue
Mm-hmm.
on a scale that Shorten never imagined when he took it to the last election as an election issue. This time it's going to be deadly serious because everybody in the disability world knows that neither the Liberal Party nor the Labor Party is committed to an NDIS as it was envisioned.
That's been proven over and over.
Yeah. Yep. And so people are saying, what do we do now? How do we fix this? And in the next 3 or 4 days, I'm going to publish on LinkedIn what I call the NDIS Repair Manifesto or Recovery Manifesto. Still playing with the words. But the first step is to repeal the last legislation, because up until September it was bad. Now it's diabolical.
The disaster.
So repeal that legislation, take it back to bad, and then launch a Royal Commission on the same framework as the RoboDebt Royal Commission happened, which was look inside the system. You know that the NDIS review never looked inside the operations of the NDIS?
They never do.
Because that's where all the problems are.
Yep.
And so it was oh so easy to blame the participants and the providers, particularly the small ones who are defenseless. And in fact, the majority of the harm comes out of the government itself.
I have a beautiful term that I throw around with Kate a lot when we're discussing families and their challenges with NDIS, and it's all smoke and mirrors.
Well,
It's
it is all smoke
deflection.
and mirrors.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't believe, up on my screen at the moment, dated 5th of February 2025, new tools to better understand participants' support needs.
Oh, yes, I read about that yesterday. Yes.
One of the things that fascinates me here is that this story says we are going to use automated technology to work out what you need.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we call algorithms. And yet Shorten and the NDIA constantly saying, no, we don't use algorithms. We've never used algorithms. We would never use algorithms. Here's an algorithm, folks.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, do you know what an algorithm actually is?
No.
It's a set of parameters, isn't it?
Oh, it's even simpler than that. It's the set of steps that you use to complete a task.
Mm.
And
So my brain runs algorithms all the time. It's running a whole lot of them now.
Yeah.
One of them's making me talk, another one's making my finger go around, and so on.
And that's why participants find it so hard, because the or any government agency, but specific NDIS, as we're talking about it, it chooses to just put certain diagnoses in a box.
Yes.
And if you fall outside, they don't look at the individual and the effects of that diagnosis on that particular individual. It's about, well, this is what this says on the piece of paper that I'm ticking off, so this is what I'm going to give you.
I'll give you a wonderful case of a harmful government algorithm that I encountered a number of times.
Yeah.
When I applied for my pension. I've been in technology 45 years. I'm comfortable with using online tools. I invented some of them. And so I'm going through the question and answer script to apply for my pension. And the question comes, have you ever received any compensation payments? Yes, I have. What were they for? So, well, I sued a guy for the harm that he caused me for sexually assaulting me.
Mm-hmm.
What was his name?
Well,
what's his phone number? What's his address? And no, you can't go any further in this pension application until you provide that data.
Yeah. Irrelevant information. It's irrelevant to the actual application.
Absolutely irrelevant. And it caused me to go catatonic for 3 months and not do anything.
Yeah.
So, you know.
How did you get past that?
My partner bundled me into the car and drove me to a Centrelink office and said, this is ridiculous.
Mm.
And they said, we would never ask you those questions. but the computer did.
Mm-hmm.
Because somebody programmed the computer to ask questions that are outside the scope of what it was supposed to be doing.
Yep.
Just like the NDIA programmed the computer to go outside the scope of what its purpose was. That's the algorithm problem. And somehow we only now assign the term algorithm to things that are harmful. Or at least that's what Bill Shorten and Forkingham and co do. We don't put anything harmful in our systems, therefore there are no algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to ask, Mark, in terms of Jeff, you said every 9 months you get a new plan. Does that mean that his costs are covered, or do you have to contribute to his costs because of what you choose for him as a living?
We make the funding deliver what he needs.
Yes.
We don't get paid for any of the work we do,
No.
of course.
No.
That would be a horrific idea that the person who does the most significant work does it for free. And you've got your pension, you don't need any more. By the way, I used to have a whole lot of super. Haven't got any more. Why not? Because I had to survive on my super only from age 60 to 67, because in that period I wasn't able to work because I was supporting my son.
Yep.
And I know that there are tens of thousands of parents who are in exactly the same situation. The need to fill in for the gaps in the system have meant that those parents have been unable to save and have had to draw down on their super. They have had to sell homes. They have had to sell all sorts of assets in order to sustain themselves because the government doesn't meet its obligations to support people who need support.
Yeah.
We see it all the time with some of our clients where the participants have very elderly parents and, they don't have the means to continue, and they stress so much about what's going to happen when they're no longer here.
So I'm coming up 70 and I'm still in pretty good health. I am very involved with the support of one gentleman. I don't think we can call him young anymore. He's in his early 50s. His parents are in their mid-70s. They're still involved in an ART battle that started 4 years ago. What's their quality of life like? Wow. I know a very long-time friend of mine from the industry has a 35-year-old toddler.
Yeah.
That the agency refuses to accept the diagnoses for that young man and therefore forces his mother to still be an unpaid carer because they won't provide the funding and the type of funding that is needed to look after him.
And where's their quality of life? Where's your quality of life? You've worked so hard to get to retirement and it hasn't stopped. And I know that we would always do it for our children. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. That's what the government relies on.
Yeah. And look at the state of my farm. The fences are falling down. There's weeds everywhere because I don't have the time and the mental strength to deal with that as well as all of the other crap.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. I reflect a lot on the change in society through my nearly 70 years. 70 years ago, people who had disability were not really seen or heard.
They were locked
But
away.
they were locked away for the most desperately needing cases, but the vast majority of them were just looked after at home by family, by mum and so on. But 70 years ago, the family unit had one income earner, dad, and mum did a hell of a lot of work, including looking after the disabled 35-year-old son. And it was part of the system. But the single income stream was enough to facilitate that happening. It wasn't perfect, but it was actually a bloody sight better than it is now.
Yeah.
Because now you need the two income streams to maintain the basic elements of life.
Just to survive.
Yeah, and you don't have all of that extra capacity. So the demographers haven't even picked this up really well. But the change in the way that society operates has created a mandatory requirement for government to fill the gaps that were left by moving people out of the unpaid workforce into the paid workforce. And, I look back and laugh when I was studying economics back in high school and first year at university. We learned that gross domestic product is the value of everything that is produced and sold, plus the value of farm produce consumed in the farm. And I thought, gee, that must be a hell of a lot. And proportionally, it probably was. But what they were trying to capture was the value of stuff that isn't paid for because it's created and consumed elsewhere. How about we go back and redo those numbers for the last 75 years, calculating into GDP the value of services provided in the home environment by the unpaid workers?
It's huge.
You'd get a totally different perspective on economics and the skews in economics that have happened as the government has, in the case of the Liberals, intentionally, in the case of Labor, blindly walked into the scenario where the economics of income distribution, wealth sharing, have skewed so extremely to the wealthy owning everything and everybody else being a serf. And we're seeing the last step of that transition happening again in the US at the moment, aren't we? The oligarchs are coming. So very pleasing to note that the Tesla car sales have dropped like a stone.
Oh, have they?
Yes.
Awesome.
I've never been a fan of Tesla, so thank you for that.
Mark, we're coming up to the end. We've almost running out of time. What are your hopes for the future, for the disability community, for yourself personally, for Jeff? What changes do you want to see made?
So when I publish this manifesto, you'll see it there laid out. We have to stop the NDIS from self-destructing any further. We have to do the Royal Commission, and then we have to rewind, and we have to segment the NDIS into chunks so that we can rebuild it in flight. We can't just turn it all off. We've got to rebuild it in flight. And this time, the people who oversee and design and control the rebuild have to be real people with real disability experience. I'm not talking about the simpering little sycophants who follow Bill Shorten around going, oh, isn't he good? Isn't he good? Isn't he good? All of the ones who've got some sort of graft that is encouraging them. I'm talking about people like me, people like me, people like the father of this young man in his mid-70s now, the father, but very sharp. We need to rebuild the NDIS in flight from scratch. We need to take it from a rickety old biplane to a supersonic jet. And we got to rebuild a whole lot of societal attitude around that at the same time. It can be done. The NDIS doesn't need to cost what it costs at the moment. I posted a little thing last night. You know, this big bundle of paper here, 31 pages, that's one half of a bunch of snail mails that were sent to me about a month ago about Jeff's plan, which all should have been sent to me as emails, but weren't, and which were addressed separately to me and to Jeff at the same address. That's about $40 worth of base cost in printing and postage.
Mm-hmm.
Not even time.
No.
Not even time. So, look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves.
Yeah.
The NDIA can't even look after its base costs. So, what do I hope for? I hope for an NDIA that becomes extremely efficient and effective and acceptable. The three key words for governing bodies: efficient, effective, and acceptable. Yeah. It is grossly inefficient. It is grossly ineffective, and it is grossly unacceptable in its
we can all definitely agree on that one.
Yep. We have to drive that through in about 3 years. We have to repair the damage that's been caused. We have to take people who've lost their homes through NDIS misfeasance back into the situation where they again own their own homes. We have to financially compensate probably 100,000 people out of the 600,000 participants. We have to financially compensate them for the harm that has been caused to them. We have to hold accountable through a Royal Commission and a Corruption Commission investigation, a serious one, all of the people who have caused harm to NDIS participants.
And including
just about top of that list.
Sorry, including the ones that have had their eligibility revoked quite recently.
Absolutely.
And there are a number of.
Yeah. Any harm whatsoever. It has been said that this, and I think it will be, this will be the biggest class action that Australia has ever seen. The damage that's been caused is on a similar scale to what is documented with the British Post Office and its postmasters. So if you haven't watched it yet, find Mr. Bates versus the Post Office and see just how significant the issue is in other parts of the world as well. This is not just an Australian problem. It's an international problem where government bureaucrats become overly powerful, stop caring, and focus on their own performance measures rather than on delivering something to their clients.
Yeah.
For me, I want to retire. Please. I want to do what I intended to do.
I don't see that happening, Mark.
You're too passionate. I don't think you'd be able to sit down for long.
Well, I'd like to spend half my day working on my farm.
Yeah.
If I spend the other half doing other stuff, then yeah.
Yeah.
It's only 40 acres. Half a day is enough.
Yeah.
But, you know,
You should be able to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got projects in my shed that, you know, they're mounting up. They need to be done. But currently the system doesn't allow it. I'm expecting that we will have a hung parliament after May. I'm expecting that out of that hung parliament we will get a royal commission. I'm expecting that by this time next year we'll have a royal commission report and we'll be starting corruption proceedings against a whole lot of people. But we'll also by then have stopped the harm and we'll be working on the solution.
Maybe.
And just to make it absolutely abundantly clear for all of the right-wingers, when we stop the harm, it's going to start to cost significantly more money because that's the way that the system goes. If you want to stop the harm, you've got to spend more money up front and then you work out how to make the system fair and acceptable afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like when your car breaks down. The first thing you've got to do is spend some money to get it to a repair shop.
Yeah.
And then you spend some money to get it going again. And then the costs start to go down again.
You do the maintenance so that you don't have to spend those big costs.
Yeah, that's right.
Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today, and thank you for your views on being a carer, being an advocate, and your beautiful son, Jeff. He couldn't do it without you. So we do look forward to keeping in touch. All of your links will be on social media. We'll let you know when it does go live, and I'm sure people will reach out to you if they have any questions.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Kate.
Thank you.
And thanks, Jen.
We appreciate it. You have a great day.
Okay.